Yeah, well, we were a large family. We were 11 children, and my parents spoke French only, so we would speak French all the time at home. We lived on the farm, so we were away from the others, and our neighbors spoke French. So our friends and the relatives, I mean, not that many relatives, though, but our neighbors, friends spoke French. Well, when they were in Canada, my father, they lived with his parents on a farm. And when he met my mother, who lived in Thetford Mines, Quebec, and my father was Saint-Antoine de Boisbriand, which is the outskirt of Thetford Mines. Well, once they got married, she went to live with her in-laws. They had 2 children, and then there was not enough work for them. And they knew some people in Augusta, some friends, and the friends invited them over, and they came down to Augusta and settled there. I know when they got there, they lived with them for a while and my father worked in the mill, which he did not like. But anyway, once they were able to have a home, they built a home, and he found a job on a farm. And he worked for this farmer, and my mother was home with the children. And when he had enough money to buy his own farm, he did. And we were like 3 miles away from the city, but that's okay. It was great. He had the business delivering milk from door to door. And since we were 7 boys, 4 girls, my mother said, the boys go with you, they work with you in the barn, and if I keep my girls in the house. And so they would deliver milk from door to door. Yeah, plenty of cows, like 25 cows. I have to milk them twice a day. And they didn't have those machines then, so it's a good thing the boys were there to help. And they had to have a garden. They would plant corn. And I remember picking up like 100 dozens of corns just to go deliver, to sell. Anyway, my father would do that. We went to help for that, though. We helped with the planting and haying. They had the horses, and we had to go walk on the hay, and so they could put as much as they could. So we were busy.
It's hard work.
Yep.
Physical.
Very, very hard work.
I was born in Lewiston, and when I was just a few months old, my father was drafted into the Army for the Second World War. And so my mother went to live with my grandmother, and one of my uncles, one of his brothers, was also drafted, so his wife went to live with my grandmother. So we were multiple families in one apartment on Maple Street here in Lewiston. And when my father came back from the war, of course my grandparents spoke French, and so I got it as an only child. But when my father came back, I was about 3 years old. He became a truck driver, and he worked for several of the trucking companies here in town. And my grandfather, even back then and until his retirement, worked across the street at the mill. He ended up being what they call the boss. That was a floor supervisor.
Yes.
So when my father came back, my family, I had a younger brother by that time. They had moved out to Turner for a little while, and then when he got a job, we moved here, living in Little Canada. And so I started school here at St. Mary's, and then the family got too large, so we moved to a bigger apartment.
How many children?
I'm the oldest of 8. And so we moved to several different parishes, and but when we moved back into this parish, I was still going to school here, and I went to French school till 6th grade. But being older than the others, I was the only one that got the French education.
Really?
So my other brothers and sisters went to public school.
Was the family speaking French at home?
No, when my father came back from the service, he did not want French spoken in the house because he had been too ridiculed. So we did not speak French unless I went to my grandmother's and spoke French with her. And even now, I have one of my father's siblings. If I speak French to her, she slips back into English. She answers me in English, and I'll say, "Do you realize you just answered me in English?" Because most of my aunts married English-speaking husbands, and because my mother was one of 12, there were 9 girls.
Was your mother French-speaking as well?
My mother my mother's 93. She still lives, and I try to keep her speaking French because I'm trying to reacquisition my French. And so I try my French with as many people as I can, but there are very few of them that will keep a whole conversation going in French. And I also experienced it in high school. I have a brother I had a brother, he's passed away now, who was only 15 months younger than I. And in high school, the French kids had to stick together because you weren't allowed into the clubs. And
I didn't experience that. No,
Yes.
We did attend parochial schools, and it was mostly we had French and English, but it was mostly French, and our friends were all speaking French. And then when I went to high school, I came 2 years over here in Lewiston at St. Dom's.
yes, so that's also French.
So that was also French, but that was
Yes,
not a
yes.
problem.
So
The French that I did speak back then helped me because when I was in high school, I had some part-time jobs in some of the little stores on
Yeah.
Lisbon Street, and it was good for them to have, a French-speaking person, especially, the ladies that came in for their shoes. They were embarrassed to speak English, and a lot of the elderly in town at the time, they knew English, but they were afraid to speak it because they didn't want to be ridiculed.
yes.
But, we used public transportation a lot, and I used to love to sit behind somebody, and they'd be speaking French, and then an English word, and they'd just go back and forth and back and forth, and, without even thinking that they were doing it. So that's, when you feel you're really bilingual, when your mind doesn't stop to think, am I going to speak French or English today?
Yeah, it's true.
Now, with issues,
I can't say we had very serious health issues in my family, except I do recall a call from Canada saying that, talking to my mother, saying that she had lost her brother who had died of a heart attack. But of course they couldn't go. And he was, I would say, in his 40s, so he was young.
yes. So that's a pretty early age.
Yeah.
Heart attack. How about you?
I was very lucky. I guess we've got good genes in our family because both my grandfathers lived, one to 73 and one to 80. My mother's 93 and still living on her own. My father died in his mid-70s, but it was from cancer. Through, especially once you get on Medicare, they check a lot of those things.
Yeah.
So I've been on the statin for a while, and
Luckily, you have no ill effects.
No. And like I said, my son, my oldest son, who he plays squash and runs and all of that, and he has very high cholesterol, but his good cholesterol is double what it needs to be. So,
Yeah.
so
And your
he's
daughter, is she
and
also?
my daughter, she's very athletic, and she's fine too. But my oldest son, his sons who are now in their early 20s, are finding that their cholesterol needs managing.
Kind of imagine what it must have been.
I remember when we'd come back from school, we'd go to the barn, bring a cup, and they put milk and then drink it. We had good
With
meat,
all
we had
the
good
cream.
food. Yeah, and everything. We were very happy, I gotta say.
Yeah.
We enjoyed, we had a good life, I think, on the farm.
Yeah.
And you're not that tempted. You didn't see anybody. The neighbors were far. You couldn't even see the neighbors on each side of the house. But we were happy. Of course, you have 11 children. You have plenty. You have people to play with. Mm-hmm. And so it was fine for us. And we happened to have, there was a camp on our grounds. And it was called Camp Cozy Nook. And it was really a nice camp. And people would come, les forestiers catholiques, they would come and have the picnic over there. So again, it was a thrill for us. They'd come right over there. We'd see people swimming in a little, we called it a lake, but it's a little pond, I'm sure. For us, it was big, but now I look at this, oh my God, we went swimming in there. But it was, to me, we had a good life.
It sounds like you had a beautiful life.
We did.
Are your siblings all still alive?
There's 4 that passed away, but they were, like one was 25, the one was 40, then another one's 69, and the other one's 83. So there's 4, but they lived quite a bit,
Yes.
25 years. I have a twin sister, and she's fine. She lives right now she's in Bangor. She had 6 children, but
And healthy? Everybody in
Yeah,
good
she's
health?
healthy.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah, we thank the Lord because if you're 79, you're still living. My parents were young. My mother was 56 when she passed away. She had cancer of the stomach. And my father was 59, died a month apart. So they were very young. One went in, he joined the Job Corps. I think they had Job Corps then, the youngest. And my oldest brother took care of the other one that was 17. And
Jeepers.
but
Did you keep the farm? I mean, what happened?
okay, no, look, remember you work on the farm? Yes, you do work hard on the farm. And nobody wanted the farm. Too much work.
Yeah.
You never had time, never have a break. No weekends
Well,
off.
with the cows especially. I know. When you're a dairy farmer, it's unbelievable.
It's true. Unless it's a business.
Yes.
If you have a business, but if it's just family, you don't have time. You don't have weekends off or days off or anything like that.
So you sold the farm.
So my brother bought it, but then he turned it to a chicken. Just chicken where you just have to put the feed and everything. My brother bought that, but then now that's sold. So.
How did your father pass away? What happened?
Okay, he had cancer. He had perforated intestines.
Oh dear.
Okay, so that poisoned him.
Yes.
And of course, when my mother was very sick, my mother said to him, look, she was dying the next day. She just said, don't, my father was crying. She said, don't cry. When I get to heaven, I'll come and get you first. He said, do that. Well, my sisters were there. They said, doesn't make sense. Dad is too well. Well, a month later, he went into the hospital and they discovered maybe he could have pain, but he never complained because of my mother who was sick. But they operated on him and he never came back. And when they took him out of his room because they took him to go up, he says, look, I'm not coming back. Your mother's coming for me, and he never did come back. So that's how it ended for him.
How old were you?
A month.
How old were you?
Well, I was like 26. I was in the convent then. I was a nun then. And my mother, having 11 children, 4 girls, 7 boys, she says, it's a man's world. To her, it was easier for a man than it was for a woman. And I think so too. But anyway, she would say, if my girls want to become nuns, fine with me. But she wouldn't force you into anything, but if you wanted to. So my sister, I have a sister, an older one who passed away now. She became a nun. And then a few years later, I became a nun. And
what order were you in?
Presentation of Mary, just like in Augusta, when we went to school, parochial school, they were the Sisters of Presentation of Mary. So we entered that convent, and I loved it. I was 15 years, and I did like my 15 years. But then I came out because the church had changed so much. Hey, I'll still be the same person whether I'm there or... So I came out.
So what color was your habit?
Black. It was black with white.
So very traditional.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, I just said like the church. The church changed so much.
The church changed.
Oh yeah, in a way, because your way of thinking was not the same. When nowadays everything was a sin. When I was younger, everything, I said, my God, the only people that can go to heaven are priests and nuns, according to me. And I said, well, I want to go to heaven. But then God is love, God is great. It seemed like for a while there was no more sins. Hey, I'm going to get out of here. I came out. I came out and
because you thought you had a possibility
well,
of making
now.
it to heaven afterwards.
Yeah, well, I didn't have to become. So I came out. My twin got married. She never thought of entering the convent. I did. So that's what happened. I came out, and I just got married 5 years later. I didn't come out right away to get married or anything like that, but it was not being in the convent all the time. Although I did like my years.
Yes.
I'm not sorry for these
Yes,
15 years. They
that's
were
very
very good
interesting.
years.
I went to work for a year or so, and then I met my husband, and I stayed home with my children until the last one was in school. We bought an old place out in Poland, and it's been a challenge ever since. Just when you buy a 100-year-old house,
Yep.
it
Mine's
owns you.
200-year-old. Yes, I completely realize.
So I raised 3 children, and when the last one was in school, I went back to work. I worked for the town of Poland to start with, and then I worked in town for an attorney for 26 years, retired just a couple of years ago, which I enjoyed a lot. It was
Who'd you work for?
Crockett, Philbrook, and Crouch. They did not do criminal stuff. It was closings, real estate closings,
Yes.
and a lot of family things, wills and estates, and so and a few corporations. And my grandfather, on my father's side, came here when he was 5 years old. As a matter of fact, the building that Gospel Haven is in has the name Sharist up above that. That's my maiden name. His brothers had a grocery store there. I guess he was the youngest of a large family. And he never got his citizenship, so my grandmother never let him go back to Canada. That was the story in the family. We can't go to Canada. Papa's going to stay, be kept there. So my husband and I have taken trips, to Quebec, and we enjoy it, but we don't have the connection there because most of my grandfather's family moved to the States. He had some that had gone all the way to Chicago, but he stayed in Lewiston and worked the mills, and
Like so many others.
Yeah, and they had 9 children. My father was one of 9, so we are 40 grandchildren on one side and 32 on the other. So,
Wow.
But very, very, I don't know of any of them that speak French. I'm the oldest of. I babysat a lot of them, so I was born right at the beginning of the war. So all the men went off to war. So most of the cousins are 8, 10 years younger than I. Actually, most of them stayed right here in Lewiston. I had a couple of aunts that went out to California after high school and ended up meeting somebody from Lewiston and getting married to a Lewiston person out there.
That's funny.
But, the cousins are all spread around. But most of I remember, Christmases at either grandmother, you had, 20 or 30 grandkids, and everybody in the kitchen, all the aunts in the kitchen cooking. Both.
It must have been wonderful.
Yeah, it was
So what was
chaotic.
The food? What was the food?
Well, let's see. My mother always made a cherry cake for my grandfather. That was his favorite. So there was always cherry cake, and always the turkey. But growing up with Lent, you always couldn't eat meat, so we had a lot of crepes with everything on it.
And what
And
about
salmon
that
pie.
pie? I was just going to take
Salmon pie, yeah.
What's the traditional name for the pies? The meat pies.
The meat pie, tortilla.
Tortilla, yeah, tortilla.
Tortilla?
Yeah.
Tortilla. T-O-U-R-T-I-E-R-E.
Oh, tortilla.
Tortilla, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They serve some here. You'll have to come sometime to
Yeah,
our
very
events.
good.
Thank you.
But
Yeah.
crepes were the standby. I mean, my brothers had
Crepes.
them with peanut butter, with whatever on it that you wanted, not just maple syrup.
Oh, yeah.
When I have unexpected company now, I'll make up some crepes and
Crepes are so good.
crepes,
They are
and I
good.
put rice, and then my husband makes a nice clam sauce, so we feel like we're giving somebody a gourmet meal when it's the easiest thing for me to make.
And did you have a pâté chinois?
Well,
Chinese
my
pie.
husband loves that.
Yeah, me too.
It's
Chinese.
it's actually shepherd's pie, but in
See, they
French
call
we
it
call
shepherd.
it Chinese pie for some reason.
Yeah,
But-
we call it Chinese pie.
Pâté
And
chinois.
shepherd's pie, I think the shepherd's pie, do you put peas in it?
I put peas in mine.
Okay, so that's what's a shepherd. The other one is a
With just
pâté
corn.
chinois.
With
Yeah,
just
with
the
just
corn.
corn. Yeah,
Pâté chinois?
pâté
Pâté
chinois,
chinois.
yeah.
Chinois.
Pâté chinois, Chinese.
Oui.